That's the name of our show.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to The Large Glass. I'm Todd.
I'm Terry.
It's good to see you tonight.
It is.
I got to tell you, the heat is starting to get to me. I'm a little wiped out.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. We got people here already. We got John Park and Pumpkin Audrey. Gin and tonic time.
Yay.
I love that. Mixing cocktails with Jess Park.
Sweet.
We did okay tonight on picking out what we were drinking. And I didn't think we'd do well, but I think we did all right. Hi, Mom. Nice to see you. Nice to see you. So we got a cool show tonight.
We do have a cool show. We have a busy show tonight.
There's Ben Hagenbush and
Hi,
Dave.
Ben.
Hi,
Hey,
Dave. Hi,
Dave.
Ben. We have an insane number of birthdays tonight, which is like
Yeah,
crazy.
it is crazy. July.
Yeah. Oh, there's David Backus. Hi, David. Nice to see you. We are going to be drinking tonight, David, out of some beautiful Memphis mugs that Hamlet sent us as a thank you gift, and I'm really excited about that, which makes me think we should just pour.
Get into it.
Let's get into it.
Let's do it.
I'm giving you the gold
Why,
rim
thank you.
because it's special.
Says Memphis.
Now, so we have two different beers tonight. One, we've got Terry's going to drink a Stella, and the reason she's drinking a Stella is because, one, she wanted something a little lighter, but primarily because our neighbors had a baby girl yesterday, and they named her Stella. Mm-hmm. So Terry's
She was born yesterday.
She was born yesterday. So Terry's drinking in honor of Stella.
Baby Stella.
And of course, I am sticking with our theme of drinking in terms of our artist. And I have a beer called From the Wreckage. And the reason I'm drinking that is because our artist, Ted Larsen, tonight utilizes metal from cars that have been salvaged in some of his sculptures. And so I thought From the Wreckage was a pretty good idea. Now,
I can tell you why I'm not drinking it.
yeah, go ahead. Tell them why you're not drinking it, hon.
Guess what the percentage is on this beverage? Any guesses? Just a ballpark. Just throw a number out there. Wow.
David says
look
Stella,
at-
my beer of choice. See?
Yes, that's a good
and
one.
David, she's drinking it because it's your beer of choice.
That's true.
This is a really nice
Really
chocolatey
nice,
stout.
chocolatey.
10.5%.
10.5%.
I'm gonna forget to push buttons in a little while, but that's
I know my
okay.
name in a little while if I drank that.
What episode are we on?
We are on episode 47.
47.
47.
And I'm happy about that. Cheers.
I am too.
Cheers to all of you. Tell us what you're drinking in the chat, even though most of you already have. We'd love to hear. Oh. There's a reason why this is $20 a 4-pack. Oh my God, that is delicious. Okay, this is called From the Wreckage, and it's by Wandering Soul. The brewery is Wandering Soul From the Wreckage Imperial Stout. It is awesome. Oh, it's like a meal. I will go slowly. Mom says she's drinking coffee.
Ooh. Ben says just like chocolate.
Just like chocolate. It is just like chocolate. It actually
Looks
has like a
like it.
chocolatey flavor to it.
It does, yes.
I dig it. So we've got to do a featured supporter.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't we jump into who our featured supporter is? Because I think this person has done a lot for us in different ways. Mm-hmm. We're going to hopefully be having this person on the show in September because they're having an exhibition that is going to be happening in September, and it turns out that that exhibition might even travel. So we're going to try to get up to where they live to hit that exhibition.
Yes.
So tonight's featured supporter is I Hate Username. It's supposed to be I Hate Usernames 67, but I screwed that one up. So I Hate Username 67. Thank you.
Thank you.
Number one, thank you for doing all the birthday work that you do for us, which is
Yes.
one of the reasons why we barely can have a show tonight because we've got
Yes,
18 birthdays.
He doubled our birthday list, so.
But with
big
really good
thank you.
stuff.
Really good stuff.
Dave's
Yeah.
having a vodka and OJ, by
Oh,
the way.
nice.
So 67, it's for you. Thank you
you.
for everything you've done for us. We really appreciate that. I don't even know if you're here or not, but
He will be eventually.
alas, it is what it is. All right, so we do have some news tonight, and I wanted to jump into that. And oftentimes when I do news, the news tends to be sad news. So we do have some sad news. And we're going to start out not with that slide. We're going to start out with this slide. So this is Mr. Biz Markie, who, as most of you know by now, he sadly passed away this past week at the super young age of 57 years old. So it was sad to lose him. You know, as a rapper, I thought he was really a fun, brilliant person. An Aperol Spritz for Jess Park. I like that.
Ooh,
I like that.
very nice.
That sounds good in summary. But one of the things I loved about Biz Markie having kids is there was a fantastic show for kids on TV called Yo Gabba Gabba. And Biz Markie did a short segment on Yo Gabba Gabba, and I just wanted to pull that up for a second because it was called Biz's Beat of the Day. Biz Markie was really known for beatboxing, and he does this thing where he teaches kids to beatbox on this kids program, and I love him. So let's take a look.
Hey kids, just gather around for Biz's Beat of the Day. I'm gonna teach you some sounds.
Hey kids, this is Super Biz, and I got a super beat for you to do. Super beat. Super beat. Okay, try it one more time. Super beat. Super beat. Now practice this at home, kids, and I'll see y'all next time. Bye-bye.
Okay, so Biz Markie,
Yeah.
unfortunately 57 years old, and I have a little bottom thing here, which I was supposed to throw in there before, but he's born in 64.
Yeah.
So that's a bummer.
That's
And the
a bummer.
second piece of news I have, which is one more unfortunate passing this week, was Mr. Christian Boltanski, another fantastic artist who we lost this week. Really well known for some of his absolutely epic scale installations. Really fantastic artist, and we lost him as well. He did manage to live a longer life than Biz Markie did, but you know, still a loss to the art world nonetheless. So now that we get the sad news out of the way, maybe we should move on to some birthdays.
Yes.
Do you think so?
Let's do that.
All right, let's see what we can get. So if we do all the birthdays today in under 10 minutes,
Yeah.
I'll be amazed.
Okay. Well, we can go.
All right. I mean, we don't have. There's no pressure. We don't
No,
have
there's
to do
no
it.
pressure. I love birthdays because it gives us an opportunity to remember artists that maybe we don't think about normally. So they pop up, and we get to like explore them a little bit.
Right. And Ripple Flux is here. Hey man, how are you? It's good to see you. You did make it. All right. So let's dig
dive
in.
right
I'm
in.
gonna open them up, and we're gonna try and sail. So who do we have first?
First birthday. So today is Giorgio Moranzi. He's an Italian painter, printmaker, known for his still life series.
Okay.
He mostly painted vases and dishes and plates and stuff like that. Really beautiful work. So he was born in 1890. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Giorgio. All right, let's keep going.
Next,
I love
we
this one.
have Judy Chicago.
Yeah.
She was born in 1939 on this very day. She's an American feminist artist, educator.
I had to put Dinner Party up because that's the one she's most known for.
Yes, very large collaborative pieces. So
There's also a really awesome Judy Chicago Grant Foundation for artists that she supplies to artists, which is really generous, and I discovered that recently, and I love that is out there.
yeah, so happy birthday, Judy.
Happy birthday, Judy. We're going to keep on going, and another awesome artist.
Yes, this is Namjoon Pike. He was born on this day as well, back in 1932. He's a Korean-American artist. He does a lot of work with technology. He's the grandfather of using technology in art.
Agreed.
So happy birthday to him.
Happy birthday, and moving on,
Yes, this is Laszlo.
Moholy-Nagy.
Thank you.
I jumped in because I wanted to say.
I know you did.
Moholy-Nagy.
Moholy-Nagy. So he was born on this day as well in 1895. This was a popular birthday. He's a Hungarian painter and photographer, professor in the Bauhaus School, constructivism. he really wanted technology in the arts. That was something he was a big advocate for. So happy birthday to him as well.
Happy birthday to him. And then we're bringing this artist in. This is Mr. Kojo Griffin, and we brought him in because Hamlet Dobbins actually mentioned him on his show and wanted his birthday recognized. And what an awesome artist Kojo is, too.
And he was born on July 21st, 1971. He's an American visual artist.
Pumpkin Audrey says hug, and then she says Hungarian, which I think she meant to type both of those things.
Yes.
I don't think that's
Hungarian.
hug the Hungarian.
Yes.
And actually, Audrey asked us once if there were any significant Hungarian artists out
There you
there.
go.
And there you are. And he did not come to mind, Moholy-Nagy, when we were first having that discussion, but he does now. So, and let's not overshadow Kojo
Kojo's
here.
birthday.
Yeah,
Yep.
so happy birthday,
happy
Kojo.
birthday.
All right, moving on.
Moving
Who do we
on,
have
this
here?
is Edward Hopper. He was
Yeah.
born on July 22nd, 1882. Realist painter, printmaker, made some very iconic paintings in his day. My dad used to copy his paintings all the time. So happy birthday to Edward.
Happy birthday, Hopper. All right, moving on.
Moving on, July 22nd, 1898, Alexander Calder, American sculptor known for his mobiles mostly. Oh, that's a tongue twister, even though it's not.
Known for mobiles mostly. I think that, well, let me finish this. And we'll see if I can still talk.
Yes, he's got a show at the MoMA right now, Modern from the Start. It's up till January 2022. But happy birthday to him.
Happy birthday, Alexander. And who do we have here?
So July 23rd, 1909, Norman Lewis's birthday. He's an American painter, scholar, teacher, abstract expressionist. He was painting mostly in the Harlem Renaissance. He mostly depicted Black urban struggles in life. So happy birthday to him.
Happy birthday. We are cranking along here.
We are cranking along.
Mr. Mucha.
Mr. Mucha, Alphonse Mucha. He was born on the 24th of July in 1939. He's known for these very theatrical posters, and Sandra Bernhard was featured in many, many of them. Czech painter, illustrator, Art Nouveau style. Lived in Paris most of his life.
Beautiful
Happy
stuff.
birthday,
Happy
gorgeous
birthday.
Yeah.
All right, moving down the line here.
Moving down the line.
Alex Katz.
Alex Katz was born on July 24th, 1927.
Could you guys believe how many birthdays there are this week?
I
I'm
know.
sorry, keep going.
He's 94 this year.
He's
so
still
he's
cranking
still
away.
cranking away. American figurative artist known for his paintings, sculptures, and prints.
Audrey's drinking her drink over there, her gin and tonic, and she's just yelling, Magyars!
Oh, goodness.
I would yell that curse you taught me in Hungarian, but I'd probably offend somebody.
Okay.
Speaking of offending people,
I don't think he's offensive.
I
at all.
don't either. I love this
his
guy's
stuff.
work.
This is Mel Ramos. He was born on July 24th, 1935. He's an American figure painter, juxtaposed a lot of sexy ladies with some commercial art. Like he would juxtapose Velveeta and a woman lying on them, or
Jeez.
other things like this. So he was a realist abstract artist.
No, I like these pieces.
I love
actually.
his pieces.
All right.
I have a thing for pinups, so when I
This
was
is up your alley.
introduced to his work,
Yeah.
I absolutely adored it.
Yeah,
so.
this is definitely up
Yeah,
your alley.
he's awesome. So happy birthday.
Moving on.
Moving
I
on.
love Sheila Hicks.
Sheila Hicks is going to be 87 this year.
I think I put 3 slides in for Sheila Hicks this time because she's just a love.
She was born on July 24th, 1934, known as a sculptural and textile artist. She did a lot of experimental weavings, and she worked with a lot of natural materials, colors, working with narratives.
Ma, you think you hoard fabric? Check this woman
Yeah,
out. This
isn't
is
that
like this is
amazing?
serious. I love these sculptures.
Oh my God, they're
Love
so
these.
beautiful.
All right,
So
happy
beautiful.
birthday, Sheila.
Happy birthday.
All right, moving on.
Moving on, Thomas Eakins. He was born on July 25th, 1844, American realist painter, photographer, sculptor, fine arts educator. My favorite painting, which I'm not sure which painting you put in here, was the Gross Clinic. This was one of the studies in which he would go into the theater of medicine and do some life painting. So, love him.
I wonder if you can still do that.
I don't know, but this is how anesthesia came about. They would do this like in Philadelphia at Jefferson's school. They would have like the anesthesiologist down there and the doctor, and they would do these modeled like surgeries Before anesthesia, they would bring in people off the street and do surgeries, and then they started discovering the different modalities of anesthesia and try them out. But this is how people learned, especially like in Philadelphia, it was like a big place for this. If you read Dr. Mooter's Marvels, you'll find out all about it. That was the book I read that.
Which, by the way, is a
about it.
fantastic Philadelphia museum
Yep.
if you're in that area to go and see the Mooter
But
Museum.
I digress. I will
Yes,
just
yes,
get
we're
right back
supposed
on
to be
track.
cranking through our birthdays
sorry.
here.
Happy birthday.
All right, moving on.
July 25th, 1870, Maxfield Parrish, American painter, illustrator, known for his neoclassicism, romanticism reflections.
Can I go down this rabbit hole for a second with everybody?
Because I found this painting when I was not very familiar with Parrish's work, so I saw this painting. I'm like, boy, she looks familiar.
Yeah, so Maxfield Parrish was working in the early 1900s, and he created a body of work that was embraced and sort of just, well, George Lucas loved his work, and George Lucas collects his work. And when you look at this, you cannot not see Princess Leia in this. Now, this painting was done more than 100 years ago.
1910.
Yeah.
It's called Griselda. It's 40 inches by 32 inches oil on canvas.
And if you look at certain other aspects of Parrish's paintings, you can get a sense for the landscape and certain color aesthetics that are all present in that movie. And so, you know, I have always loved Star Wars since I was a kid, and realizing this coming out of fine arts like this, I mean, Parrish is not my favorite painter, but then knowing this makes it that much more interesting.
And knowing that this happened like 65 years prior to Star Wars coming out, and this was the inspiration, that's really amazing.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, and Lucas used other aspects from the distant past, like, you know, myth and the way he told stories to write that. So there's a lot of elements from the history from varied histories that sort of contribute to that. But I digress.
Yes.
Moving
Happy
on.
birthday.
Oh, this guy.
Stanley Kubrick.
I didn't know what film to pick for him. I was going to do
so
Clockwork
many.
Orange.
Clockwork Orange,
I was, but
Eyes Wide Shut, The Shining. Those were all his.
I liked Eyes Wide Shut.
Yeah.
I, of course, picked the quintessential Kubrick film and went with 2001.
Oh, yes.
I can't let you do that, Dave.
He was born on July 26, 1928. American film director and producer, screenwriter.
I love that look on his face.
photographer.
He's
Intense.
so intense and brilliant.
Yeah, so happy birthday.
We're going to keep on going here.
726, July 26, George Gross. 1893, he was a German artist. He was known for caricature paintings and drawings of Berlin life, and Expressionism, Cubism, Futurism. So happy birthday, George.
And last but not least,
George Catlin.
Mr. Catlin.
Yes. July 26, 1796. He was a realist painter, mostly known for his
Paintings of Native American life.
Americans, very American
He was
tradition.
obsessed with Native American life.
He was. That's the majority of his portfolio. So, yeah, happy birthday.
All right.
All right.
I think we made it.
We made
I
it.
think we made it through all of this.
All of those. Lots of
Make sure all
birthdays.
this closes down because there are so many things open right now. I'm just waiting for the whole system to just
Looking
crash.
to see how long that took us. I don't think it took that long.
No, that wasn't bad at all.
Yeah,
that was like 12 minutes.
right.
12 minutes
Good.
for 19 birthdays. Okay, so as usual, we'll talk about support tonight briefly. You know, again, supporting us can come in a number of ways, and you know, telling a friend to come and watch the show could be, and to follow would be certainly very helpful. And if we get to 200 followers, we're going to be giving away a Susan Stillman painting, which I'm, you know, frankly really excited about. Now, at the rate we're moving, we will probably give that Susan Stillman painting away in the fall. Okay, fine, that's fine. But you could help us get there faster by getting friends to follow and watch. If you have a chance, go online and check out her work. We like to plug her as much as we can because, you know, the generous donation that she made, she deserves a little bit of time, you know, being viewed by people. So that is a good thing. Now, The other thing is we are on Patreon. So if you want to pop over to Patreon and join us, we put some exclusive content up there. We did another Who's Your Favorite Artist this week. And this week our favorite artists were relatives, which we've each got a video up there for that. So hop on over to Patreon if you feel so inclined. And that is the end of our plug
It is.
for that. Okay. So should we get down to business?
We should get down to business.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's start out with, why don't you sort of introduce Ted Larsen, and we can start talking about who he is and what he does.
Yes. So we're going to talk about Ted Larsen tonight. And we did have, once again, somebody else on the calendar that we bumped because we were thinking about sculpture, and Todd introduced me to this particular sculptor, and I really loved his work just as much as Todd did, and we thought he was super exciting, and we really wanted to talk about him. So that's who we picked for tonight.
And, you know, I do like the conversation we have on this show about abstraction. And especially, you know, we talk about this a lot in the world of painting. And with sculpture, it can be equally challenging for people that are new to looking at art. And this is one of the reasons why I love bringing up an artist like this. I see an artist like this, I see work like this, and I gasp. I feel a sense of connection to this, and I kind of hope tonight to be able to flesh that out for you so that maybe you can have that too. So you want to give us a little background on Mr. Larsen?
I certainly can. So Mr. Larsen, he was actually born in Michigan. At the age of 15, he moved to Santa Fe, New Mexico with his
He was born
family.
at the age of 15? That must have been incredibly painful.
You're halfway done with that beer? He was born in Michigan, and at the age of 15, he moved to Santa Fe.
I couldn't resist. I'm sorry.
So, yes, that's exactly what happened. So, as a kid, he was really drawn towards discarded materials, tractor parts. They lived near an airport, and he'd like to look at the abandoned parts of planes and
Right.
stuff like that. So that was really his inspiration for the materials that he currently uses and plays with. He actually began as a painter, and he excelled in it. His degree is from the Midwest. I just got to flip around a little bit because his stuff. He's got a bachelor's from the Northern Arizona University. And at 22, he was already painting, and he eventually got a show at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. He was excelling at painting. He mastered it. He loved landscape painting. When the World Trade Center attacks happened in 2001, he abandoned it, and he decided to start working with materials. And he was particularly drawn to metals and particular palettes. They intrigued him as well. He was drawn to the yellows and greens and blues. It had to have a certain aesthetic for him to work with it. Vulcanized rubber was another material he worked with, some wood, and that's kind of how he started.
You know, one thing that is important to consider when we're looking at these on a screen is that these are physical objects that hang on a wall in most cases. I think they all hang on a wall. And it's very difficult, if not impossible, to get a real feel for what it is you're seeing when we're looking at a flat image of a three-dimensional thing. You know, we can pretend that we're, you know, we can look at elements of, you know, like surface quality. We can try to hone in on joinery and all the things we'll probably talk about tonight. But keep in mind that it's really hard to grasp or wrap your head around what's really there in this image. And actually, Larsen goes on a rant about this in one of his Instagram posts about how he's really troubled by the fact that this is the primary way that most people experience his work. I mean, he's got more followers on Instagram than would ever show up at the collective number of gallery openings that you could add up, right? Which points towards this idea that more people see it this way than in real life. And I'll admit, I have not seen these in person, and to give a plug.
But we're going to.
To give a plug to Instagram, and say, well, I discovered this artist, or I was able to sort of find out about this artist through Instagram, and now I will go and look. So it has a benefit.
It does have a benefit.
But I don't want to get away from the work right now. I do want to say that I think that, keep in mind, because we're talking about painting and we're talking about sculpture, that there is a physicality, there's a dimensionality to this. And you can tell by the drop shadows on the wall to some degree, but it doesn't always play out as well as it should. So you were saying?
Well, that was pretty much it. I will say he's fairly young. There's not a ton of scholarly materials written about him. There's very few videos on him as well. So a lot of the research was kind of just going with the flow here.
Well, this is one of the reasons why we do this too, and why I personally prefer to do artists that are not necessarily the blue chip big museum artists. Not that he's not valued that way.
He's kind of getting there.
Yeah, he is, no doubt. But I mean, this is why I would rather not do a show on Monet. That I would rather do a show on somebody that I could make new for you. So anyway, what is it about these works that, when we talk about the world between painting and sculpture, I think that there's a really interesting connection here, and how he moved from one space into the other, and how he pulled the world of painting into that world of sculpture from a number of different facets. But did you have something you wanted to say about that? Did I cut you off on that, or am I?
No, he does explore where painting and sculpture meet. One of the things he also said was seeing them in person was integral, because there's an interaction that happens as you're moving around the sculpture. Your perception's constantly switching.
Sure.
And changing, and that was fundamental to some of his artwork.
Yeah, I mean, we can keep in mind that one of the primary differences between looking at a painting and experiencing a piece of sculpture, or looking at it, is as you move your eye in relationship to that thing on the wall or that thing on the pedestal, the perceptual viewpoint changes, right? So the lines change, the interaction changes. And so what you wind up with is all of those things that a painting tries to do from an illusionistic perceptual standpoint are actually happening here. In the painting, as you move from side to side, they all stay the same. But here, there's a much more physical connection that the viewer has with the work, and that changes everything. John Park is saying the block-like inclusions and use of negative space reminds me of Jim Osmond a bit.
A little bit, yes.
Yeah, totally. And I wanted to bring him up, actually, because I definitely feel like there's a connection.
Oh, definitely, because Jim also uses paint and sculpture, and they kind of collide as well.
But Ted does not use paint in his sculpture.
Ted does not use paint
Well,
in his sculpture.
okay, I take that back. He uses paint, but he does not paint these. He's using pieces of metal that have the inherent qualities of those colors already in them. These scraps of metal are coming with those colors.
I think in some pieces, though, he does utilize paint.
Okay.
I think. I could be wrong.
I'm wondering if maybe, well, I'm gonna say I think otherwise. But,
Okay, no problem.
But you know what? You're pretty meticulous in your research. So
this piece right here is called Serious Fun. It's 2021, so it's a relatively new piece. It's comprised of salvaged steel, marine grade plywood, silicone hardware. It's about 21 inches by 17.5 by 5 centimeters. So yep.
Okay. Well, again, I think one of the things that we kind of, can we just pretend for a minute that I'm right?
Yeah, we can pretend you're right.
The reason I want to pretend I'm right is because given that the metal, now imagine this, these pieces are mostly constructed, not exclusively, but mostly constructed of things like marine grade plywood as a core, and then they seem to be skinned in this metal material that's been salvaged from auto yards, okay? So the color, I'm assuming the color, because as I tried to get really close to these in the photo and look, an ironic thing to say, you can see little bits and pieces of patina, rust, staining. And so I will give the benefit of the doubt here and say...
Well, and he does say that he looks for materials with certain palette.
Of course.
Right.
Yeah, no, of course. And so if we just say for a minute, the metal that is used in this to skin these pieces came with that color, right? Then it really interestingly defies painting.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't think he paints in this piece, but I do think he does utilize paint in some of his pieces.
Okay.
Because he explores that connection. He started off as painting, but
Right. Well, he had said at one point, there's a quote, he says, "Painting without paint. I reject the brush, but not painting itself."
I see.
So my thinking is around that quote that this is certainly about painting because there's elements of color composition and spatial sort of relationships, but I believe that the paint that is present here was inherent in the material. Well, inherent. Of course, the car was painted at one time, right?
Actually, he talks about the value of being inherent because he gets into there was an interviewer that talked to him about him going towards nature. And he's like, well, I go towards the inherent nature of things. He wants to look at the history of the object, deconstruct it and reconstruct it to give it an alternate history.
I think I saw that same interview where somebody wanted to talk about the notion of nature, and his response had something to do with him seeing nature in two different ways. Nature from the standpoint of outside, the ecological elements of nature, and then nature from the standpoint of the inherent qualities, the nature of a material. Right? And so with these, I think the inherent qualities of this material, as it's pulled from wherever it's pulled from and manipulated back into this form, has it's sort of reborn in a weird kind of way to sort of now, number one, obviously fit the piece, right? But number two, those patinas, those different shades, the way the shapes stack and cast shadow and recede and project, it all now, that inherent nature of the material now takes on a new life in that new form. And there's so many other aspects and qualities of this that we could talk about that I still haven't even gotten to yet, but I love that element of nature. But yeah, definitely references to Jim Osmond here, for sure. And Jim is very different because he's similar but different in that Jim does utilize paint on a material. And I think that one thing that Jim very successfully struggles with is that integration, because as soon as you start to apply paint to a material, whether it's already in the sculpture or whether the paint is going on the material and then later is put into the sculpture, you have a different kind of argument that's taking place with the materials, because somehow, to me, paint's job is to be something other than it is. And in Jim's case, he's using that paint as a covering of a surface, but he finds a way to give paint its credence as material. Just like the walnut might have the qualities of walnut, the paint has qualities of paint that are not trying to do something else,
Right.
which I think is beautiful.
That is beautiful.
I love that.
Yeah.
I'm rambling.
That's okay. So this piece, I believe, is actually last year it was in Paris because it was exhibited there.
We're pulling, actually, by the way, we are pulling all of this stuff from Ted
his
Larsen's
Instagram. He's got a gorgeous Instagram.
which is at Ted Larsen Works. Definitely follow him. I mean, that feed is just chock full of juicy little beautiful sculptures. Definitely check him out.
I do love his, because he's also relying on light here. That's something outside of the sculpture that he needs for his pieces to be successful. Because the light is actually helping to produce those shadows that we see, but also when the shadows are reflecting back on the object, it paints it a different color on certain areas. You know, that pure white or the white background is no longer white. It's like this cream color, and it gives it some variety of tone, and that's part of the beauty, I think, of his sculpture as well.
Well, and that brings up an interesting point, because there's a really strange element that I kind of want to talk about here, and that is the fact that these sculptures hang on a wall. Okay, so in
Most of his sculptures seem to
hang on a wall, right? So what do we have here? If the sculpture hangs on the wall, it's an object that hangs on the wall, like a painting is an object that hangs on a wall.
Yeah.
Right? And so there we have just the simplest, most direct connection to painting I think that we can make. But I think there's more interesting ones here. So the one you just made about how it may inadvertently, in its cast of shadow, alter the color of the wall very subtly.
Well, the wall, but also the pieces.
Oh,
like
sure.
if you look, if you're looking at these in terms of these geometric, what are they, parallelograms, and then you go down a little bit. The third one there, the color's just a little bit off,
Sure.
and you need that. And like sometimes when you see some of his pieces, it almost casts like a blue glow to it because of the way that the shadow's projecting.
Well, we could look at this
and
one.
it changes what it is like. And if you were to change the light, it would change the sculpture just a little bit.
Sure. But I think the other thing that's really interesting about these, when we consider its relationship to the wall,
The
right,
wall.
is there is. There's a word I want to use. They kind of have a kind of shyness about them, right? Because when you're tucked up against a wall, right?
Like wallflower.
Well, there's this. Well, yeah, but I'm thinking about that side that's backed into the wall, the side that's not fully revealed. Yet, if you look at this blue piece, you can see that there are these angularities where it actually butts up against the wall that become these places that you kind of want to get into and see, these intimate spaces that are not allowed to be viewed. And so it suggests to me that the piece has a kind of minor vulnerability or a minor kind of shyness to it that I kind of like that. I kind of like the fact that something's withheld in it, right? So, for what it's worth, its connection to the wall has a lot of really interesting connections to, other genres of art making, as well as this kind of viewer relationship that's not fully allowed to exist. So, anyway, there's a bunch of other things I want to talk about with these, but that wall thing is just.
That wall thing is, and a lot of his pieces are up against the wall. Now he does have some that are standing in the round. He goes even a little bit flatter, where it does almost become like a painting again too. He's got a couple of the pieces that are two-dimensional, but they have a lot of texture and variegated pieces in there.
And we'll get to some of those. I have some in the show. Pumpkin Audrey wants to know the approximate size on these. And they vary, of course, but they're in the realm, if I'm not mistaken.
This one, let's see. He usually puts them up. This one's very small. It's 7.5 by 4 by 4 inches. So that's pretty.
So 4 inches off the wall, 4 inches wide, 7.5 inches high. Yeah. So they are, also in the realm of intimacy, they're that size that could be held in the hand, or they're that size when mounted on the wall that needs to be approached and looked at carefully and closely. They must draw you in, right? So.
I like this one. It's warm.
Yeah, no, I love the tonality on this too, and I feel like there's subtle plays in the paint on these with what the material could also be, right? So, I remember seeing these for a while and then realizing, or maybe scrolling through the feed and realizing now that they're metal, and I thought, wow, they don't. And this might be one of the things he rants about in the fact that I'm looking at them on a screen, is they don't necessarily read as metal immediately. Now, in real life, they might, and I'm probably missing a major, immediate experiential sort of thing with them because of that. One thing I want to point out about these that I also think is really quite brilliant and beautiful is the ways in which edges work. So you can't not notice how the edges of these things come together, join, line up, reveal themselves. When a craftsperson puts together some kind of joinery, whether it's a miter joint or a dovetail or there is a certain sort of reveal of the joint or intentional hiding of the joint. In the case of the dovetail, we reveal it, but we want our our joints to be very tight and very clean. If we're using a miter joint, it's meant to completely hide the joint and create the razor sharp edge. But in all these cases, we want a cleanness. And Larsen, I think, intentionally thwarts that just the slightest bit, and it calls attention to the edge. The edge is important. The edge is almost like the element of the drawing under the painting, in the design of the painting. The edge exists kind of like that. There's this weird connection between the edge of the work and the immediacy of the drawn line somehow. And they fight one another in a really cool kind of way.
It's interesting that there's almost an optical continuity of that one line on the bottom, that you follow it all the way around, and right when there's a break in this connection, there's a shadow play in which it connects the lines together. Like, I don't know if that's just what
I think that's something you're seeing.
palette is doing, or there's something in the perceptual shift, because you almost feel like that line's continuing with the way that the shadow is
I'm gonna
projected.
offer a hypothesis here. There's Amanda Toolin. Hi. Yeah, these are really amazing pieces. I'm gonna offer a hypothesis for why there's that continuity there.
Okay.
I believe, look at the way the edges are beveled back on the sides, and how they sort of, on the right side, you can see the bevel because it sort of, recedes back in an advancing kind of way. The bevels on the left side go back in a kind of retreating kind of way. Now,
Okay.
that orange bar that meets that gap, it almost looks like those bevels are either straight down or slightly receding.
Oh, possibly.
And if that orange line turns 90 degrees and runs in along that bevel, it might reflect light down into the shadow space, which would create this beautiful ghost-like form in there.
That's kind of what's happening.
Right? And if you think about that in terms of painting, the negative space, which is physical here, almost becomes like this top layer, and that orange bar almost sits behind what would be essentially a glaze. Right? So there's this real interesting play. And this is one of the reasons why I'm pissed I don't have this in front of me right now to actually look at. So, Amanda's like, yeah.
Really
Good, you're getting into it.
fantastic.
Yeah, shadow contributes. Yeah, totally. And this is something I think that is one of the brilliant things about these. I do like the embedding of the line in the form.
Yeah, like an inlay.
Like an inlay. Yeah, and here's another really good example of that. A little bit more complicated here. The line almost seems to switch back as it snakes around and doesn't necessarily have the same color play that we think that other one did. But
Again, you're seeing those shadows produce an alternate color as well. It's like adding to it a little bit.
right, and it seems like there's this also this sort of implied notion of this kind of infinite turnability, this infinite compositional shift that one could have by manipulating that. Love where the outline is missing in the left side top. Was that I think that might have been in the last. Let me see if she's talking about the last one.
Possibly.
Maybe where the piece meets the wall.
Yeah.
Right, where that creamy bevel meets the wall, and that intentionally exposed Penrose feel. Yeah, and I think Amanda, this is the one you're talking about. In that, I hope I'm on the right. In the last one, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I like that too. How the piece both sits on the wall, it floats above the wall, it joins with the wall. It becomes one with the wall. It's like this really beautiful kind of way in which all the panels relate in different ways, giving different viewpoints of their own sort of thing. Here's another one I think that does that really well. But again, I think we're losing something in not being able to look over that yellow edge, right? To sort of peer in and
explore
behind.
it. He wants you to explore his pieces a little bit. So it's kind of it's interesting. It is kind of a catch-22 because you want to share your work online so that others become familiar with it and they see it, but then they're not experiencing it, and how it's meant to be experienced. So it's a tricky place for a sculptor to be, I think, today.
Sure. Well, again, one of the things that Larsen talks about in a couple of the interviews that he's had is how, as a practitioner, he'll create a set of rules for himself in the studio, and that set of rules might be applied, iterated in as many possible ways as he can to sort of flesh out a series of objects along that set of rules. And so as we look at some of these, we can kind of see or feel the different sets of rules in play. And, you know, I'm not going to necessarily say I know what those are, but I sort of feel like it develops an automatic relationship between the pieces that feels like that rule set underneath things sort of brings together. It creates a language, which I really quite like. Amanda says, I like how it looks like the top left edge here feels like it is flush with the wall. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's what we were talking about in the last one too, is how it almost becomes part of the wall, but almost like it grows out of the wall, mm-hmm. but then doesn't, mm-hmm. right? So the relationship between the piece and the wall, which is odd to have a sculpture hanging on the wall in the first place, but it is definitely considered like all the way.
It's more like relief.
All the way. Yeah, no, that's a good point. All right, let's keep on moving, because there were some where he was working with some more rounded geometric figures where each individual section had its own color. Mm-hmm. I like in these how there's a couple of these actually, but there's a weird kind of cleanliness in the lack of cleanliness to these. There's this really cool dialogue that takes place between clean, not clean.
Well, he was talking about when he was selecting his materials too, that I don't want to say kind of like a Three Little Bears reference, but or Goldilocks and the Three Bears, but it was kind of like had to be raw but not too raw, and clean but not too clean. It had to be just right. So he was looking for materials that had this particular history to them that you could see, but he wanted the cleaner aspects of it.
Yeah.
Like that sharp.
Yeah. Well, and look at what we wind up having here. We've got these two. You've got this earth tone form, you've got this white form, right? And they're both sort of cradling or being held up by this minty green. And that minty green, in its default, wants to be that clean color. But like the minty green, let's say the minty green boys' bathroom of the high school, or the minty green in institutional wall paint, it's clean, but then it's kind of got a bit of a yellow cast patina to it. The edge, of course, is the edge, and we see that again. So I feel like it's got a freshness to it, but it's not real fresh, and I love that. I love that about it.
I do love how he lets the material define the lines too, like the actual edge of the object becomes the line drawing. And I do love that. That's kind of got a gritty feeling to it. There's some comments going on.
We got some comments going here. John Park says, the idea of having a strong personal language that allows a great deal of variety but has unity is my personal ideal of what I admire often when not just visual artists but also musicians. Yeah, so there's like it's sort of like how when you're building a vocabulary, right? A vocabulary, any vocabulary, like let's say we're taking a language, right? Languages have rules, right? Letter forms are combined to create words in a particular language. Those words can't just be jumbled together in any kind of way. So there are rule sets to the visual letter forms. There are rule sets to the ways in which those forms can be assembled, and then there are rule sets to maybe even the intonations for how those things are spoken, right? So a language has a kind of rule set that can be infinitely worked to make things that are, as simplistic as a grocery list and as beautiful as poems, right? And that's kind of how these feel to me like when he's working through that rule set. And I think that might be what John's trying to say here is, and that happens also with musicians, right? I'm assuming that might either be, and if I Hate Usernames 67 was here, he'd slaughter me right now. And he just texted me and said he's trying to get on, but he's having some technological issues. But he'd slaughter me on this because he is a fabulous musician and theorist. But it feels like that could happen in music as well. Amanda says, love where he chooses to have the high contrast edge and where not. So intentional.
Very much so.
And the minty green feels so flat. So it's odd that it holds up the upper portion. Oh, yeah, that's kind of cool. Because the upper portion has this kind of rendered quality in its patina, right? It almost has this kind of... The surfaces have an implied kind of ethereal dimensionality to them in a weird kind of way.
I do think if you stumbled across these surfaces elsewhere, they wouldn't be nearly as attractive. He puts them together in such a way
This is
that
something that's
causes
important.
interest in beauty, because like I'm looking at the materials that he's using, and come on, that green, it's like, who grew up in the 70s and had like a bathroom sink that might have had like a formica top or something like that. Like he does use some of these things, and you look at them, and if you came across these anywhere else, they wouldn't hold up so well, but he finds them and he utilizes them and gives them such a beauty and grace when he puts them together.
Yeah.
That's really just so stunning.
I think, Amanda, that flatness that you're mentioning here, and this notion that something would slip down, is that flatness weirdly comes forward while the dimensionality of the patina in the other one recedes, and it almost is like one slips behind the other. But I love what Terry's saying about the choices Larsen makes in these otherwise very forgettable things that we might see on a car sitting in an old mechanic's lot, or the Formica top, how the subtle forms, the subtle combinations of materials, the really beautiful, sensitive attention to joinery, all of a sudden now elevates and heightens those things way out of. And if you love this one, check out this one. Again, it's sort of like the blue is doing the same job the green did. The dark blue or black, whatever that form is on the right, is sort of also having that void-like space, that dropping back, that falling back kind of space. The white performs this really interesting little acrobatic act of almost dripping off the side. There's like a rotation that's taking place.
There is a rotation. The use of lines in his little carved slats along the side of that too have value there as well.
Yeah. John says, yeah, like the white looks a little like terrazzo. Yeah, it does a little bit. It's got that kind of inflection, that little bit of a marbly kind of feel. These are really it for me. I love them. Oh, good.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, I introduced these actually to someone else I know who's a designer, and I said, you have to check these out. You're going to love them. He also collects art, and he was just, he went and looked.
They are stunning.
Yeah. Let's keep rolling here because we're getting close to 9 o'clock, and I wanna actually get on to
I do love that, and this is not his intention. Jerry Saltz said this too, but gosh, it's when artists are creating things and they have an original idea that comes out, and then the viewer comes to it and brings all of their baggage with it and tries to interpret it and stuff like that. You can't help but do this sometimes when you're looking at abstract art, because this brings back a feeling of nostalgia. Like when I look at this one, I'm thinking like summertime and camper vans and all of that.
Look, Duchamp says in The Creative Act, a piece of writing of his, that the viewer completes the work, right? And Larsen talks about this a fair bit in his interviews, not directly like we're saying now. He might have, but I don't remember that. But he talks about how, he much the work requires of him, and how much, this kind of relationship he has with the work, right? And I believe he would agree with that the works are kind of what the works are, and he feels like when they're out there in the world, they're going to do their own thing. And I'm reminded of something. I'm going to keep flipping through slides here. I'm reminded of something that Hamlet Dobbins mentioned when he was on the show, and he couldn't remember who the quote came from, but it was a reference to this idea of this kind of exchange that the artist has with the art when they're working on it. And it's that feeling you have, and I've seen you do this, and one day, people, I'm going to get Terry to show you what she's working on rapidly right now. It is off the chain. It is so good. Anyway, she's going to hit me later for telling you that. But it's like that moment, and I see you do this, where you step back from what you're working on, and you can't stop looking at it. You can't stop. It's like, some people would think that you're enamored with something you've done, and there's kind of a narcissism in that, but that's not it. That's not it. There is an internal dialogue of criticality, an internal dialogue of unsuredness. There's an internal dialogue of confidence. There's an internal dialogue of give and take.
What more does this piece
pushing.
need?
Yeah,
There's a lot of that
it's
too.
asking of you. The piece asks of you.
Yeah.
And you, of course, hopefully ask of the piece. But it's a really interesting thing, and I could understand. I would like to be inside Ted Larsen's head, working on these and having the ability to have that moment with the work, to have that moment to sort of stare at these in process and hear them, or try and feel them ask for what it is that they need, or make those considerations. Because, like, look at this one. Look at the way that beautiful white stepped piece just locks into that orange other form on the right. There's just something, there's a harmony there. There is a gentleness to the line between the two, unlike the more exposed edge around the outside, which almost looks like it tries to contain them. So, there are certain things, there are certain choices, and I'm really, like, I could talk edge all night long, a line all night long with these, and never stop. And everybody would be like, well, we're going to bed, we'll see you later. But
his palette too, I think I was talking to you about this earlier today too, because this is such a gorgeous palette, but it does remind me of the Southwest. And when I went out to New Mexico, I've been there twice, and there's a small ghost town there named Madrid, and the colors of that ghost town are very similar to his color palette that he uses here. And
that's cool.
When you're thinking of salvaged material, I'm just curious to see. I'm wondering if he's ever gone there, if this somehow plays into it. Probably not, but I can't help but notice how striking of a resemblance this palette is to that small village.
Yeah, that'd be a cool question to ask.
Yeah.
I like the reference too. I mean, especially from the standpoint of like a ghost town, because there are little hints in these to the architectural, right? And they also sort of, in their patina, in their inherent surface quality, there's an age to
There
these,
is.
right?
There is, and we can almost place it. It's almost like a mid-century age.
Yeah.
It's not like
Well, look at this. I mean, if we're talking about
200 years ago, I mean, we can identify the age that this comes from,
Right.
roughly.
Right. Yeah. Even though they're made way after that age,
Of course.
they read like, or
The materials
reference.
had another life in another lifetime.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So they're really strong, and I can't stop thinking about wanting to find out where these are and going and seeing them, so that I can really wrap my head. Mom says, love this one. Well, Mom, I've got two more for you that I think you're gonna like, because this one, we're starting to now sort of see how the rounded aspects are treated, and that sort of I don't want to say the word lapstrake, because lapstrake is a boat building technique, and in lapstrake, one board overlaps the next. So this is not technically lapstrake, but it is a kind of edge to edge kind of joinery that allows form to sort of round, almost like a boat hull would round. So like a strip built boat would be. Not that this is a boat reference at all, it's just what comes to mind. But, you know, I love that we're starting to sort of see this other way in which dimensionality is created, and also how line in these can sort of be used. I love this penetrating trench that runs through this. It's so juicy, and I would not be able to not touch these and get myself thrown out of the gallery.
Well, you know, I was thinking the same thing. Like, what do they feel like? Are they cool to the touch? I had thought of that too, because they do have a sensuality to them, where
Oh
you
my
want
God,
to get
yeah.
close to them and you want to feel them and touch them and
Put
see
your
what
face
they-
on.
Put your
Why
face
is it
on
when something?
them.
Why is it when something's cool like that you want to put your
You want
cheek
to put
on?
your cheek on it? I don't know.
Because you're already going to be intimately close in on these because of their size. You're going to be drawn in. So there's
Right.
only a few inches between you and that space, almost as if you might be able to feel that
Yeah.
cool without physically touching it.
Right.
But Amanda says they're really very alluring.
They really are.
Mom loves these.
Now, he was talking to this one interviewer, and they were having this little exchange about minimalism.
Yeah.
Because the interviewer had alluded to, you know, minimalistic art, and Ted Larsen seemed a little bit not agreeing with that. He considered himself more to be like a reductionist, that he liked to take the materials, take them apart, and rebuild them, kind of thing. He liked to reduce the pieces down to their elements, and he was more in attune with that perspective than going as a minimalist.
I get that. I mean, and I think that he also said at one point that he does recognize that he contributes to
Yes,
the
because there's certain
discourse.
traits, right? And he does follow rules. He knows the rules, so he does contribute to it.
to
but-
like a minimalist discourse, even
Right.
if he doesn't necessarily equate these with minimalist pieces. I would like the 3, please. Already know where they would go. Oh, mom's picking up
Oh
a set.
my.
I don't think it's very easy to acquire these. I think these sell very
No.
quickly.
No, I did see a couple for sale, but they are, you know, a couple $1,000s.
Well, of
So,
course
yeah, of
they are,
course
and
they
I believe
are.
they're very well worth it.
Yeah.
So he gets into this spot with these next couple where he's recognizing some of the negative spaces with other materials, and I love how in this, so that center area, that white center area, is wax, and I think that that's a really interesting way to approach sort of recognizing a void, right? So he could have left that open, right, and we'd recognize that as negative space. But we still recognize this as a kind of negative space with the choice of wax in the space, because it's I'm not going to say it's a non-material. It's got such a viscosity and a tactility to it that's very different from what else he's using, but the translucency, the light quality in it, it becomes a very different kind of space that still reads as negative to me, which is really kind of brilliant as
Yeah.
a choice.
Plus, it softens some of the harder edges too. It really diffuses and.
Right. And when we were talking before about how light is cast, shadow is cast, color is sort of reflected to. This, I think, plays a very interesting role in that. Mom loves this one. Ben says, I really do love all the hard work that he spent putting into these designs. Yeah, you know, there's something about, there's a craftsmanship here that I can really appreciate. And it's a craftsmanship that is both embraced and defied. And I think he tries to walk a fine line between, you know, showing off the joint, but at the same time, you know, I often wonder about how he chooses that initial form that he begins to skin with these. But, you know, that probably goes back to his rule set, right? Here's another one with wax on it that sort of fills out that curvature and turns it rectilinear, which is just just gorgeous, right? It almost seems to drip down that front. So, all right, let's move into a couple of new ones here
You know
that are.
what? Can you just go up a little bit there? There's this one. This one.
This?
Yeah, that one. He really relies on the natural tendency of the piece. I just thought that was interesting because you see usually these solid planes of color or metals. You see a lot of metals. You don't see too many wooden pieces, and this one is just that. He actually wrote about Jasper Johns when he put this one up. He said in 1964, Jasper Johns wrote himself a note in his sketchbook: take an object, do something to it, do something else to it, repeat.
Yeah,
This piece
it's one of my
is-
favorite quotes from Jasper Johns.
Yep. This
Yeah.
piece is called Half Dressed. It was created this past year, wood, paint, and hardware. So he did paint this.
Well, I would still say he didn't paint this. I would say he found those pieces of wood with the paint on it like that.
But why wouldn't he say paint on the other pieces if he found them with paint? So this piece is 12¼ by 9 by 4¾ inches.
Well, there's another one here that also is a more wood-based piece,
Yes.
still with the marks in it from the mill, in some of that mass-produced lumber that is usually used for some kind of like pallet-driven kind of utilitarian kind of wood, but interesting nonetheless, right?
Yep. Your mom loves the distress.
Yeah,
of
mom's
these.
getting down with this one. Mom, it gets better.
It does.
I'm gonna skip this one
oh,
because
that's
I
right.
want
We
to
didn't
jump.
even cover his.
I know, but I want to jump to some of these real quickly because these sort of get into a kind of framework underneath them. That this framework now sort of defies some of the solidity of the earlier pieces and pushes these planes now off the wall. So, one might. I mean, if we were still going to make references to painting, which, we can do all day long, and after a while it probably gets a little bit redundant, but, this is a different way to approach the way in which the stretcher might hold a canvas, right? But at the same time, there's also an architectural element to this. There's a grid work to this. He went on a whim and called Agnes Martin. There was a story I read about him.
She was in New Mexico.
And Agnes Martin lived in New Mexico. And so this piece makes me think about that because Agnes Martin's paintings and drawings were grid-like in nature and referenced nature, the other nature, the outside nature that Larsen was sort of delineating the differences between the two. And so, I see this grid structure here, and I really think about Agnes Martin in these pieces, right? So there's another one here. Yeah, Mom, it actually does remind me a little bit of the maple chucks from spinning metal, for sure. These are very different approaches to the work, but I do like some of the airiness off the wall, the way the cast shadow is, the intimacy of the space that one could sort of dive through. These actually remind me a lot of the paintings I'm working on right now, so I've got a personal connection to this one. I feel like that resonates with me. The phenolic, yes. I never knew how to spell phenolic. I think that's going to be a word I struggle with for the rest of my life, but I'll go with that spelling. But yeah, phenolic is, actually phenolic is an interesting thing to talk about with these, and you and I are probably the only ones that are going to understand what that means. But phenolic is a composite material that is used. It looks like wood, it feels like wood, but it's not. It is a series of micro laminations and resin that create one of the most dense, hardened woods you could ever imagine. It's incredibly expensive, and it's typically used to be cut into tooling for machinists and spinning applications and different types of machine blocks. It's really, really got an allure to it. And the surface quality, the lamination edge, this is something I would bet Ted Larsen would love to get his hands on, is old phenolic. It's a beautiful material. But I digress. Oh, I see you're painting in this, Todd. Oh, good. I'm not the only one. But yeah, so Ted, if you watch this, go find some phenolic. It's a really, really interesting material that's got, a good old feel to it, and it's got density. Like it's a sculptor's material. I feel it is. I definitely have the draw to it. So, I'm interested in the way he's kind of breaking up these spaces and sort of injecting this other kind of linear architecture into these. I find them to be kind of interesting. John says, beautiful. Variation in the language here really evident, deconstructing the solid shape behind. Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say about this one that's on the screen now, is it's like a deconstruction, right? It's like he found that space that some other element would have either been plugged into or leapt off of, and then broke it down, which I really kind of appreciate. Yeah, Audrey, definitely different. And if you think that's different, he also goes into this other kind of flattened, now we're really going back to a much more painterly referential kind of piece. I'm bouncing all over the place in the timeline here, but I was just talking about them essentially in chunks.
Well, these were all essentially done in the past decade, because he really honed in on this kind of work.
Yeah.
Since I guess it's 2 decades, because the World Trade Center was the impetus for
the switch.
Right. So.
And in a lot of ways, this is, this becomes like a painting. Because what's happening is the use of shape and color, but as flat juxtaposed relationships that imply dimensionality, you wind up with this illusion of a sculpture. At the same time, it sits on a cradled frame, like a painting, but so it is an object that is trying to emulate a painting of an object, but at the same time is now again becoming an object because of that. It's
really...
It's kind of interesting that way. Here's another one that's very landscapey, very sort of referential to the landscape. I really rather like this one, actually.
I do enjoy his more two-dimensional pieces.
Yeah, there's another one back here that we hadn't quite seen.
This one's almost portraitesque, It's got some reference there.
So, I think this artist, Amanda says, it feels like he grabbed one of the solid shapes and it was a flat digital screen and a hand goes into it, breaks up all the color, fragmenting and splitting it. I can't describe what I mean. I think I know what you mean. It feels like, maybe the rule set for those pieces took something that was referential and sort of broke it apart and reassembled it, right? Which could be. This has an aerial landscape kind of quality to it. It at the same time does have a kind of portrait kind of quality to it. So was there one more I wanted to show? I think we're down to the end here. I've got this very I picked this one out because I also feel like there's something to this that there's a complexity and a simplicity to this that I really love. To go through everything we've just gone through and settle on one where it's monochromatic and there's a very, very simple and subtle relationship between one very imposing form. One of the sort of lessons we used to teach in three-dimensional design was there's a very sort of simple design solution to form, and that is you have the dominant, the subdominant, and the subordinate. And so there's obviously those three this is a very sort of simple exercise in dominant, subdominant, and subordinate, where, there's this imposing large red rectangle, and then there's this sort of subdominant little piece that juts out from it, almost as if this other rectangle's peeking out from behind, but also wrapping around the edge. And then this subordinate piece, this other element that, really sort of takes the third chair to the overall composition, but is a nice detail. It's a detail that says, pay attention to me. Now, does this have a bevel that slides back behind it that causes that shadow, or is this more like a flat piece?
This it's about 2.5 inches from the wall there. This one's called Simple Unleashed 2009 salvage steel, marine grade plywood, silicone, vulcanized rubber and hardware, 9.5 by 12 by 2.5 inches. So I guess it's like
Yeah, it's got a thick cradle to it.
It does.
I'd be curious to see how it sits off the wall and how that cradle deals with those two other scabbed on or relational objects. Amanda says the L shape and the little line on the left have a presence and personality. Yeah, exactly. It's like they're laying there and cannot see each other. I love that.
Huh.
Yeah. Yeah, that's that's sweet. I like that.
It is.
Well, anyway, I love this guy. I think that this is somebody that, well, number one, you should definitely follow him on Instagram and keep an eye on what he does. But in keeping with his wishes and keeping with what it is that he would like to have you do,
He wants you to experience
he wants you to see the work in person.
He doesn't want you to just look at a bunch of pictures. So.
And frankly, I'd love to buy one. But
I'd love to see it every day.
I would love to actually have the ability to have a visual conversation with this on a daily basis. So
now he does post his exhibits on his Instagram, like with his the images that he has, and he also has a website. Did you? I don't know if you had put it up before, but it's tedlarsen.com.
Yeah,
So
I didn't have that as a lower third to put in. But real quickly, Jess Park says some of the others earlier were interesting. They had a square or rectangle of colored metal that were perfectly straight sides in the photo. I wonder if those straight lines are the same in person at different viewing angles, and that I think is where the juice of this is.
He really likes that shifting of perception. He likes to make the piece change in the different viewpoints and the viewer change. There's this dialogue, and that's really what he likes to explore. I think there were some videos on YouTube of gallery tours. He did these projects with the Margaret Thatcher Gallery, and they actually walk around the pieces so that you can kind of see it. It's still not the same.
Right, it's not. But John is saying Jess Park wants one too now. Thanks, large glass. That's awesome. Well, I have to tell you that I think this was a really good. And by the way, I'm just going to talk as if I don't notice that there are these credits rolling up the screen right now, because I kind of wanted to put that in there. I think it's fun to have credits at the end.
It's fun to have credits.
I will say this: I think that Ted Larsen, as a sculptor, really brings a really unique perspective to the table for the way in which painting and sculpture sort of intertwine. I think we need to get out there and see them. I think we need to go find them and check them out.
I agree.
So I did manage to I want to show you something. Okay, first of all, I barely dented.
Oh my God.
Okay, I poured this glass at least half full. At least half full, and I just emptied the can. Look at this.
Cow.
This is 10.5%, and I feel like I got hit by a bat.
Wow.
Can you imagine if I finished this?
No.
I poured this just for the toast.
Just for the toast. I have a teeny weeny bit left in my glass.
Do you want some of this?
No, but thank you.
Everybody, thank you so much for watching tonight. We can't wait to see you again.
Yes.
Come back next Tuesday and we will chat some more. John and Jess Park, we have you on our radar because we know that we might be seeing you. So we're looking forward to that. Anyway, cheers to all of you. Thanks for watching. I'm going to look for the button, which I can never find.
Okay.
But have a great night. We'll see you soon.
Good night.